Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
You're both from the Northwest.
that's right. Yeah. So there's a few of us gonna get together in Yerushalayim and next Shabbos, I think, with the kids.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, tell them that their son has already started off in his preterm state, has already shown his abilities, and we're looking forward to his term as president.
Lou.
All right, so let's get started. So I'm glad that you're enjoying. Okay, so we understand the question now. We learned it yesterday. Let's see how we can expand this a little bit. The question that we asked, yeah, that Rav Sharaga asked yesterday, is that a woman borrowed a piece of jewelry to go to a formal event, and she lost the piece of jewelry. She compensated the owner, which was what she was obligated to do. But then she later found the jewelry. And the woman who was compensated says, "Gee, thanks, but I'd rather keep the cash." Is she obligated to take the piece of jewelry back? That is the question that we've asked. Okay. All right. Good. So tshuva. Yesh misha katav dekeven shehi shilma al hasharsheret meritzona below al yedei kifias based in hizachtaba. So there is an opinion that because she willingly came forward to make compensation, was not ordered to do so by a Din, but rather out of the feeling of doing, she wanted to do the right thing. And as a result of that, she actually ended up purchasing. In other words, once she gave the money, the argument is that the necklace is now yours. Wherever it is in the world, you bought it, so to speak. Below omrim bazeh din shel shuma hadra shechozeret leolam. And therefore, we don't say the principle of what the Gemara talks about called shuma hadra. Does the estimate go back? Shechozeret leolam, that always can be reversed. Now, what is this talking about? He's assuming that we understand these principles. Let's take a look what the Gemara says. Inyan shuma hadrahu, the ita bebava mitzia. The Gemara in Bava Metzia states as follows: Behilchata shuma hadar laolam mishum shenemar ve'asisa hayasher ve'hatov. That we can always reverse an estimated payment based on the principle of do that which is upright and good. There's a pasuk that says ve'asisa hayasher ve'hatov, do that which is upright and good. Now, what in the world is this talking about? Well, Pirish Rashi Sham, the Shuma Hadar. So how does Rashi explain? The Nichse Love, Shashamu based in Labalchov, right? A debtor defaults on a loan. And so the Basin goes, they evaluate a certain asset that he has, a property, his Mickey Mantle baseball card, okay? Chosren Elav Imnosein Mos Labalchov. So he has to forfeit his personal item to pay back the loan, but then is able to later come up with the money. So what's the halacha? The halacha is that the debtor has a right to come back to the creditor and say, I've been able to get the money. It's almost like a pawn shop, right? Like a pawn shop principle. You can take a loan from a pawn shop, but you have to provide them with collateral. But if you can come up with the money, pawn shop has to relinquish the item that they're holding. The Gemara says, Shuma Hadra Olam, that this is indefinite, for an indefinite period of time, which is unusual because in a pawn shop, they can sell it after a certain amount of time. Yeah, yeah. So, V'chein Pasak HaRambam V'zelushano, and the Rambam Paskin similarly, based in Sheshamu L'Bal Chov. So, if the Basin evaluates a person's assets for the sake of the creditor getting paid back, Vein b'nichsei loive, vein b'mishubadim shebiyad halokeach, whether it is the assets of a debtor, whether it is a lien on someone's property, um, a person who who committed to purchase something and then can't come up with the money. Ula'achar zman hisiga yado shalova o shel nitraf o shel yorshehem, and then sometime later, the debtor is able to come up with the cash that he owes, and or even the heirs of the debtor are able to come up with the cash. Veheviu lebal chovet ma'osav, and they bring the money to the creditor. V'salkan oto me'oto karka, they can force him to vacate that property. Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions. Let's say I had a lien on a let's say based on a loan on a debt. I have a lien on your property, and I take possession of your property, and then I build a house on it, right? So you can't, if I do improvements, so that's going to change the halacha. But in any event, the principle still exists. Shahashuma choseres leba'olim la'olam, yishum shenemar ve'asisa hayosher ve'hatov. And the reason why a creditor who seizes assets lawfully has to return those assets if the debtor comes up with the cash is because of the principle of do that which is upright and good. In other words, there is a type of sentimental attachment that the debtor has to his personal assets. And so the right thing to do is to, if he can come up with the cash, to give him back what you've already taken. Mordechai was discussing before everyone came in, well, is that indefinite? Like, shouldn't there be like a time limit? Perhaps, but the Gemara doesn't give that, and the Rambam doesn't give that time limit. It's la'olam. It's in it for an indefinite time frame. That's for Hashavas Aveda. That's for how long do you have to announce a lost item? Yeah, if you find a lost item. So anyway, so who paskins this way? When the only time we say that Shuma Hadar is if a person is a creditor and seizes the debtor's assets using a Beis Din's intervention. But if a person willfully, if a person voluntarily comes forward and relinquishes what they owe and says, here, take this in exchange for what I owe you, so then you don't have a right to ask for it back because you've voluntarily relinquished it. So there is such an opinion that says that if the debtor says, listen, I can't pay you, you might as well just keep my Mickey Mantle baseball card because I can't pay you back. So then if the debtor were to come up with the money later, he wouldn't be able to buy back the baseball card. And there is such an opinion that says that because he preempted the Beis Din process and it didn't go through the legal system, you don't have a right to ask for your object back. However, yeah. Perhaps that would stand if they signed papers and things like that, right? But in any event, this is one opinion. And who is this opinion? There's a sefer called Shimru Mishpat, and as the Makor Baruch writes, he says, "V'tamu al pi mashakasav harama shebimetaltalin lo amrinan shuma hadar." That with chattel, we don't have the same attitude as we do with real estate. With real estate, when you're dealing with ancestral property, okay, so then there's an argument to be made that, give the guy back his land because the land is very much associated with an individual. Okay, that's certainly, the more you go back in history, that's certainly true. But with chattel, people easily, disassociate themselves with their stuff, right? Not as much anymore, but in the, that's the traditional attitude. So the argument being is that if I give you an object that I say, you know what, you might as well keep it. I'm not going to be able to come up with the money to pay you back in time. So since a person more readily, I guess psychologically, is able to part with objects that are not real estate, so then you don't have to give it back to them if they can come up with the money later on. Ba'od of sham harama she'im shile miritzano b'li kfias based in gam kein lo amrinan shuma hadar. And the Rama also writes that if you pay voluntarily without getting the based-in process going, we also say that that's final. There's no way that you can now later buy the object back. V'imkein hu hadin benidon didan dahavi metaltalin. He says the same thing would be here when a woman says, "Here, I'm going to give you cash." Cash is the ultimate metaltalin. It's the ultimate chattel. And she willingly paid without any coercion from the court. So therefore we say that she's now the owner of that necklace. And she has no right to coerce her friend, her neighbor, to give her back the cash if she finds the necklace later on. So, after quoting this, Rav Sharaga then says, however, the aim devar of nirin, the mistaber yoter lomar, shezeh shuma b'ta'ut, v'hi chozeret liva aleha. But he says, but it's worse over here, or better, depending upon how you look at it. The reason why this case is different from the classic case of shuma hadar, or shuma lo hadar, in the case of metaltalin, and in the case where the person voluntarily comes forward to give up the object, is because she's paying for the necklace by mistake. In other words, she thought it was lost forever. But in reality, it's not that she lost it, but it fell behind the cabinet, or who was saying that it got stuck to a thread? Mordechai, it got stuck to, or to something. Yeah, the white, it got stuck to her dress, or something else happened, but it was never really lost. And so her compensation to her neighbor to pay the $5,000 for the necklace was a case of mistaken payment. And therefore, Rav Sharaga argues if it was a mistaken payment, she should be entitled to return the necklace and get all the money back. Now, Marv, what were you saying yesterday? Your argument was that she is entitled, or she's not entitled to get the necklace back.
Yeah, I said she's not entitled because I did not see a ta'ut there. They both were under the understanding and assumption that it was lost, and it was in fact lost. They happened to then find it. But then I also looked up a little bit of secular law, and I still maintain wouldn't be able to get it back because they made a contract, and they could have built into the contract a condition that you buy my necklace back, I'll give it to you now. But if, let's say, in 30 days or 60 days or whatever, you find it, then you give me the necklace back and I give you your money back. So they could have put a condition in, at least in secular law. And so I would say a deal is a deal. That's what I would say.
Okay. All right. You're sticking to your guns. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's take a look once again at the Makor Baruch at the footnote. So he says, Nira Kavanas Rabbeinu Hagon HaMachaber Shlita. He says, what I think Reb Sharaga is making reference to over here, the Din Zedami Yoter Lamashakasov Marin B'Shulchan Aruch Sham, that this case is more analogous to another statement by the Shulchan Aruch, the Shuma B'Taus Choser Ayin Sham, that if a seizure of assets takes place, but it was done by mistake, so then it's always reversible. And in that situation, where the forfeiture of an asset was done by mistake, because the guy thought he couldn't pay back the loan, but then at the last minute, he was able to find the cash that he needed in order to pay back the debt. So that was a shuma b'tos. He forfeited his baseball card under false pretenses. Okay, v'cheinim ze metaltalim o karka. So it doesn't make a difference whether he paid voluntarily or was told to pay by Beis Din, and it also doesn't make a difference whether it's chattel or whether it's real estate. The kaven shekol ma sheshilim hayabetos. So therefore, because what you did was done mistakenly, amrinan shuma hadra la'olam va'afilu b'metaltal. Then we do say that a person gets to get his money back or his asset back, whatever the case is. And that's true even with chattel, and it's true even if you voluntarily gave it up. And I'd like to bring proof to Rav Shiraga's argument based on the Rambam. It says, V'zelashono, v'im kelim o karka, gavu Beis Din mimenu b'shuma, that if the Beis Din seized a person's assets because in order to service the debt, machzir l'shomer kelav osadehu, then the creditor, I guess, when he gets the cash, has to return to the person who forfeited his asset, has to give him back his chattel or his real estate. Are lahedja. So you see explicitly, I guess the Rambam's talking about this case of mistaken seizure. The shuma b'tos hadra filu b'metalfon. So what you see from that statement of the Rambam is that if it was seized under mistaken pretenses, so then the person who forfeited his asset is entitled to get it back, even if it's chattel. And the Or Sameach, of Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, also says the same thing based on something else the Rambam writes. Sheshuma hadra bekarka, because of Shama Magid Mishnah, the Kabbanas Aram, the Dafka bekarka mrinan Shuma hadra below b'metaltal in ayin sham. That the Rambam writes that if a seizure is made by the Beis Din and the debtor wants to get his real estate back, he's entitled. And there the Rambam only says that it works for real estate. So he says, V'kasha, the chazinon behilchos sheila ufikadon, shekasav the shuma hadra filu b'kelim canal. So isn't the Rambam contradicting himself? Because the previous Rambam that we quoted from is that when a seizure takes place, the debtor is entitled to get either the chattel or the real estate back. So how do you reconcile the two? Elavadai deshayni hasam davishuma betos, v'lechein hadra filu b'metaltal and ayin sham. So you have to say that there's two types of seizure that the Beis Din makes. One is a seizure that is not made under false pretenses. The guy simply could not service his debt with cash, and therefore the Beis Din steps in and they seize his real estate. If later on the guy is able to come up with cash, he's not. We only say that the Shuma Hadra, that we only say that he's entitled to get his real estate back if it's real estate. So, but if it's his Mickey Mantle baseball card, he's not entitled to get it back because he knew what that debt meant. He knew that he had to come up with the cash in 30 days. If he didn't come up with it in 30 days, he's got to give it. He's not entitled to get his stuff back. But if the seizure was done mistakenly, meaning the guy thought that he didn't have the money, but he really did have the money all the time. So then, regardless of whether it's real estate or chattel, the debtor is entitled to get his asset back because it was done by mistake. Either the Beis Din made a mistake or he made a mistake thinking that he didn't have the cash. Marvin, what do you say? You still sticking to your guns?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's interesting. Don't want to go up against the halacha, but I think in terms of mistake, it was a common, well, I don't think there was a mistake. I think when they looked at the situation, it was lost. And then they made the deal that given that it was lost, I'd like you to pay for it. And she said, I'll pay for it. Fine. And then it became found. Okay, so that's after the fact. So anyway, I think it's just on a definition of what ta'ut means or mistake.
Well, it
I
could also be
definitely,
a definition of what lost means. In other
yeah.
words, it could be that this woman thought that she lost it at the social event and it
Mhm.
fell off of her. And one of the waiters, probably the Arab waiter, must have picked it up, and and uh, and then she's never going to see it again. That was
Right.
that was her assumption, and that's why she so readily came forward and paid for it. And then a few days later, she discovers that it's attached to the dress that she was wearing. And so I think that you could maybe make the argument that she might present this to you as the judge. She says, Your Honor, I wanted to do the right thing, and so I immediately paid for it because I thought it was lost, but mamash lost, like it was. I'm never going to see it again. Had I known that it was really in my possession all the time, but just lost because I didn't know where it was, but it was still in my possession, I would not have paid out this cash. So, Your Honor.
I hear you. Yeah, I think that's a better argument then.
Why can't you just go and sell it and get the money back that way?
Well, maybe she could sell it, but
I don't know what you sell it for.
yeah.
But I mean,
So
all it is a cash thing.
no, Doug is just asking, why can't she just sell the bracelet? Maybe she could. Maybe she'll have to take a loss on it because it's the full retail value is not something that is necessarily going to be easy for her to find. Maybe it's a big tircha. Maybe it's a big bother to have to go to different jewelry places and find out who'll give you the best price. I don't know. We don't know from the way the question was posed, but we would assume that the owner of the necklace probably told her, you got to watch this carefully because it's a $5,000 necklace. Yeah. Well, again, that's you're siding with Marvin, that she owns the necklace, but this is the question: do we say Shuma Hadra if it was done bitaut, if it was done by mistake? So anyway, he says Va'ayin od bepischei Choshen. Look at Rav Bloy. He says Uvakovetz Hayasher v'Hatov b'Sefer Yomer Yehuda shegam nach tukein sheshuma bitos Hadra afilu b'metaltel. That all of these Sfarim also say that if a seizure took place of a person's assets by mistake or under false or mistaken pretenses, so then that seizure can be reversed. That when a seizure is done unintentionally, in other words, it was done under mistaken pretenses, then you can reverse the seizure, even if it's against the will of the owner. In other words, the guy who owns the Mickey Mantle baseball card and had to give it up, let's say, to service his debt, and then they discover that he had the cash all along, he can be compelled to pay the cash and be given back his baseball card. Because there are times when a person might say, I'll give him as my baseball card. He can deal with it. Fluctuating market, you never know. The chen kasav b'bir hagrasham, v'im kain hu adin kan, sheyachol lachu v'shechenta lekabel et hasharsheret shela b'chazara, kevin sheshilma al zeh b'tos. And therefore, since in our case, the person who borrowed the necklace can say, I know you don't want your necklace back. you'd rather keep the cash. But it was Shuma Bitos. It was done under false pretenses. I thought I had truly lost it, and in reality, it happened. So therefore, I can coerce you halachically to take your necklace back. And according to the Shulchan Aruch, that's not only true when a person thought they lost it, but it ended up being in their possession all the time. There is an opinion in the Shulchan Aruch that says that even if she lost it and it wasn't in her possession, but it turns out that she goes back to the banquet hall and didn't realize that they have a lost and found in the banquet hall where she was. She thought, that's it. I lost it in the banquet hall. The Arab workers are never going to do the right thing. And lo and behold, Ahmed did the right thing. He found the necklace. He gave it back to the lost and found at the hall, and there it was. She found it. So there, it was truly lost. It was not in her possession. But there is an opinion in the Shulchan Aruch that says that even in that case, that was a shuma b'tos. That was a seizure or a payment that was made under false or mistaken pretenses. And even in that case, a woman can say, I want to get my cash back, or I want to get my object back, whatever the case may be. That's an interesting question. Ron is asking, does Yeyush play a role in all of this? It's apparently not, because this is the classic situation of toes, where a person thought that it's lost, gave up hope of ever being able to retrieve the necklace, and yet still, once they discover that it really wasn't lost, they're entitled to ask for the cash back, because it was done, the seizure of their assets was done, or the relinquishment of their assets was done under false pretenses. Now, Rav Shraga continues and he says, "Va'afilu im hashchena kvar kanta tachshit acher im hakesef shekibla, o shebizbiza et hakesef." Now, what if the original owner of the necklace, in our case, says, "I don't have your $5,000 anymore. I bought a new necklace, or I spent it on our vacation." Okay, me'ikar hadin aleha lahachzir et hakesef shekibla kevin shekibla b'chazar et hashasheret shala. Really, the halacha requires her to come up with the cash and to give back the cash and to take her old necklace back. Umikol makom im ein lashchena kesef v'kasha la litroch ulahasi kesef u'lishalim la. However, with all of that stated, if in that circumstance the original owner says, I already spent the money, and I don't know how I'm going to get the $5,000 to give it back to you to take my old necklace back, lifnim mishuras adin yesh levater lashchena milasad kain. Then the neighbor who paid the $5,000 should be mevater. In other words, above and beyond the letter of the law. In other words, here Rav Shraga is saying, technically, the neighbor who found the necklace attached to her dress has every right in halacha to demand her cash back. But if she sees in that situation that the lady who lent her the necklace has already spent the money, and she says, I don't have it anymore. Where am I going to get the money? And she starts, this whole thing. Really, the right thing to do would be to be mevater. We can't compel you because it's above and beyond the letter of the law, but you should be mevater. Choshen amar ki amarti oilam chesed yibana, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, because I say that the world should be built on chesed. In other words, do the right thing. Aval pashat shekol od shelo asta hashchena shimush bekesef yesh l'chayvot lachzir et hakesef. But if, let's say, it was just the next day, she hasn't spent the money yet, and but she's got all of these plans what she's going to do with this $5,000, she should really give it all. She really has to give it all back. Okay, so we'll hold it here. There may be some loose ends that we want to tie up, but since us Canadians don't observe Memorial Day. We'll see you on Monday. Everyone good? Okay, so have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to all of our holy friends in Eretz Yisrael.
And
Please, God,
don't forget Lag BaOmer is Motzi Shabbos. The Hag Sameach to everybody.
Chag
Take a
Sameach.
shave.
Have a wonderful bonfire. See you on the other side. Take care.
So-
Shabbat Shalom.